This is Christopher John Bjerknes. It is April 15th, 2024. I'm going to be doing a master class today on the reasons why the United States of America has been rapidly declining these past few years. A friend of mine sent me a link to a lecture by Rabbi Mendel Kessin. And in this lecture, Rabbi Kessin explains how his people have despoiled and destroyed all of the great nations from Egypt onwards. And he explains why this is done, how it's being done, and the repercussions that it has for America. So what I did was I went ahead and I took small clips out of this very long and informative lecture, and I compiled them and I subtitled them. He uses many Hebrew terms, which both he and I will explain. And remember, you can pause the video if you want to look at those Hebrew terms, and you can then go to a search engine and find out more about it. Much of what he talks about is what I explain in my books, Beware the World to Come, Rise Above the Gods Who Hate Us, and my book series, Satanic Secrets of Jesus Christ, all of which you can find at my website, CJBBooks.com. And what Rabbi Kessin explains is a complete validation of what I wrote in those books. I've been talking about this publicly since 2005 when I published my book, The Manufacture and Sale of St. Einstein. It's discussed in several of my books, and you can find those again at CJBBooks.com. You'll also find links where you can contribute to my work. I want to thank the extremely generous people who came through for me in this very trying time that I'm going through now, so that I could produce this production for you guys. This is extremely important. Our survival and the survival of humanity depends upon understanding these facts. I've been decoding this stuff for decades. I'm the only one in the world who's done it. And today you're going to learn from the word, straight from the mouth of a rabbi, that what I've been saying is precisely correct. So I cut it out because I can summarize it much more rapidly. He starts off by explaining the story of the Garden of Eden, and that the serpent, Satan, badmouthed God and defamed God, and that all beings derive their existence from the sparks of holiness, the Kedusha, that descends from God and animates those beings. And if those beings lose those sparks of holiness, they cease to exist. And the Kabbalists call that nullification. Instead of being animated and alive with the sparks of holiness, the divine presence, the Shekinah, they instead are nullified and are dissolved into chaos and cease to exist. So Satan also required these divine sparks to exist, as did Adam and Eve. And they had a lot of them. Satan was a preferred angel of the Lord, and Adam and Eve were newly created. They were very illuminated with these holy sparks. But when Satan defamed God, he said that God had to eat from the tree of knowledge in order to become a god, and that without consuming the fruit of this tree, God would no longer be a god. And he said that God had lied to Adam and Eve and was jealous and wanted to keep them from eating of this tree of knowledge and themselves becoming gods to rival God. And this pissed God off. So God cut off the supply of holy sparks to Satan, which should have caused Satan to cease to exist. And Adam and Eve could very easily have rectified the world at that point by obeying God and rejecting what Satan had told them. But instead, Eve was tempted by the tempter, the prosecutor, and the punisher, Satan, and she ate of the fruit. And this angered God. So God cut Satan off from this flow of divine sparks. So Satan had to find a new source. So Satan tapped in to humanity, tapped into Adam and Eve. And Satan derives these sparks when Adam and Eve sinned and when their progeny sinned. So for 2,000 years, Satan continued to exist by not stealing, but absorbing the sparks of human beings that were released when human beings sinned. When human beings fail to follow the commandments of God, they lose their holy sparks, and Satan grabs these sparks. And if human beings lose all of their holiness, all of their kedusha, then they cease to exist and are nullified and dissolved into chaos and no longer have any being. Same is true of Satan. So Satan is forced to continually tempt humanity to sin so that humanity loses its sparks, which nourish Satan. But Satan can't keep these sparks for itself. Satan instead gives these holy sparks to his preferred, most evil nation. And the rabbi explains that that was initially Egypt. So the first 2,000 years of the 6,000 years of the 6 days of creation, all of humanity was Israel. They all had to obey the mitzvot, the commandments of God. And when they failed to do that, and when they sinned, they lost some of their holy sparks. Satan accumulated those that kedusha, those sparks of holiness, and gave them to Egypt, which made Egypt mighty, beautiful, and mighty. Egypt obtained the Tiferes, and Oys, the beauty and might that made it a great empire. And the Tiferes, like Tiferet, the Sephirah in the middle of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, it, right here, it is called beauty, but what it represents is the culture, the heritage, the civilization, the science, the technology, everything that makes a great nation great. The families, the community, all the traditions, all the beautiful culture. And Egypt had that because supposedly Satan gave from the sins of mankind for 2,000 of years, accumulated all those holy sparks, which brought this Tiferes, this beauty to Egypt. And also it gave Egypt oats, power, might, gavura, like this Sephirah. And so Egypt became the preeminent ruling empire on earth and ruled the earth for 2,000 years, taking all of this holy kedusha and utilizing it for its own benefit. Then along came Abraham after 2,000 years, and God chose Abraham to be the patriarch, the father of what was to become the Jews. So the rabbi's people then said that all those holy sparks on earth belonged to them. And they took on a two-part mission. Part of that mission was for Isaac's son, Isaac, the son of Abraham, then had the sons Esau and Jacob. It was Esau's job as Kafias Hara, subduing evil, to go into the Gentile world, to enter the den, to enter the prison of the Gentiles like Jesus Christ did. And it was his job to subdue evil, Kafias Hara, which means to steal all those sparks back and give them to the Jews. So the mission of the rabbi's people, one aspect of it, is to go into the Gentile world and take all their sparks of holiness. And they accuse the Gentiles of being inherently evil, and therefore they have no right to these sparks of holiness, which belong entirely to his people as their gift. And they call that tikkun olam, rectifying the world. When they steal those sparks of holiness, when they steal the wealth, when they destroy the culture, when they destroy the heritage, when they destroy the family unit, when they destroy everything that makes a great nation great, and when they take away its power, when they destroy its Tiferes and Ots, that Tiferes and Ois goes to the Jews, and then the Jews become mighty and beautiful, beautiful in the sense of obtaining culture and heritage and knowledge, all of which they admittedly did not create, but instead they take from the great nation. So what he explains that they have done to great nation after great nation is enter into those great nations as Joseph entered into Egypt. And when they enter in and they perform the 613 mitzvot, the commandments of God, that causes those nations to deteriorate and allows the Jews to accumulate all those sparks of holiness, to accumulate their wealth and to accumulate the power of that great nation. That great nation deteriorates, and then they move on to the next great nation because the Jews always sin. Therefore, by not following those mitzvot, some of their holy sparks are released. The Satan nourishes on those sparks and then gives it to his next preferred nation. And this has been a repeating process. And this is the process of this twofold mission. So Esau was inherently evil and unable to perform this mission. So this mission then passed along to his twin brother, Jacob. But Jacob had to do two things. He had to sit in his tents and contemplate God and worship God so that the 10 Sephirot would become more energized through a process of hispastis kedusha, in which they glow ever brighter with the sparks of holiness. Those descend down to Malkut, the earth, to the Jewish people. And he brings down and expands and intensifies the sparks of holiness that give and energize his people so that his people gain the Tiferes and Oits and become the ruling people on earth. But then Jacob also had to inherit the mission of his twin brother Esau of Kafias Hara, of subduing evil and going out into the field and to subdue the Gentiles in the field. And that was too much for one man to do. So Jacob gave birth to two sons. He gave birth to Joseph, and he gave birth to Judah, who became the patriarch of the rabbis' people. So Joseph took on this mission of Kafias Hara, of subduing evil, of entering into the Gentile nations, performing the 613 mitzvot, subduing their evil, taking all of that kedusha, the sparks of holiness, that animate and allow the great nations to live, that give them their beauty and might, and he sucks all of that away from them, while also taking all of their wealth and exterminating them. Now, it is incumbent upon the rabbis' people to perform the 613 mitzvot. Several of those mitzvot call for them to exterminate Amalek and the 7 nations, who each represent 10 nations. So their mission is to exterminate everyone who is not part of the rabbis' people. In other words, all of the Gentiles. That's one of the mitzvot that they perform that gives them the sparks, the holy sparks of the Gentiles. And again, all animate beings require those holy sparks to exist. So when the Jews take those away and keep them for themselves as their gift, the Gentiles perish and cease to exist forever. Other of those commandments command his people not to practice usury against themselves, but to always practice usury against the Gentiles so that they become the head and not the tail, and to ensure that they always get those debts paid off. And they have to make sure that when they practice usury against Gentiles, that the Gentiles pay those debts off. And another aspect of those mitzvot is that they must never assimilate. They must never intermarry with Gentiles. And the rabbi explains that by performing those mitzvot, they suck all the wealth out of the Gentile nations, and they steal all, he doesn't say steal, but that's what happens. They steal the holy sparks of the Gentiles, so the Gentiles lose their beauty and might, deteriorate, and eventually cease to exist. When that host has all of its beauty and might and holy sparks taken away from it by the rabbi's people, they then move on to the next host, because Satan, when the Jewish people sin, absorbs some of those holy sparks and gives them to the next nation that then becomes the host of this, you know what they are. So he goes through and he outlines how this happened in Egypt, then so that in those 2,000 years, when Abraham came along and when Joseph came along, Joseph was able to harness all those sparks from all of humanity that went to Egypt to make it beautiful and mighty. They spent 430 years in Egypt, sucked up all of that sparks of holiness, took all the wealth of the Egyptians, despoiled them, caused them to deteriorate so that they only became a local minor power in the world from that point since. And then the mission becomes even stronger with the advent of Jacob and especially his son Judah. So you have these two powers represented by the two messiahs, Messiah, son of Joseph, who performs kafias hara and sucks away and moves into Gentile nations and then destroys them from within and without. And then you have the other power of Messiah, son of David, who is supposed to energize the 10 Sephirot so that he can then change reality. And the power of these intensely animated holy sparks then gives Judah and Messiah, son of David, the ability to transform the present world, Olam Hazeh, into the world to come, Olam Haba. And in the world to come, the Gentiles will have been completely despoiled. All of their wealth will have been accumulated by the rabbi's people, as well as all of their sparks of holiness. They will then be completely nullified, annihilated, and no longer exist. And he explains that this is their right to do, this is their mission to do, and this is what happens when they move into countries and perform their 613 mitzvot. And he doesn't use the same terms as I do. These are my conclusions, not his, but you'll hear exactly what he says, how he explains it from his perspective. So I guess let's start digging into that. Again, the key thing to remember is that there are two missions. One mission is to take away everything from the Goyim so that the Goyim cease to exist. The other mission is to draw down the divine presence of Shekinah so that his people gain the power of creation to create a new world out of the present world, and that world will be the world to come, which will be their utopia. And they do this by moving into other nations. He talks about how they did this to Egypt. They did this to Babylon. They did this to Persia. And they are doing it to Rome. Rome is a slow process. And the culmination of that process is the deterioration of America, which is occurring right now. Rabbi Kessin proposes that if the Jews' slaves, the Jews' servant, Donald Trump is reelected, they will give back some of that Kedusha, some of those sparks of holiness, so that Americans can better serve the Jewish people, and that will save America from this fate until America helps to bring Messiah, son of David, into power. He talks about the idea that Trump is a messianic figure. I'm saying that he is the Messiah, son of Joseph, of the Gentile side. the Sitra Achra, the other side, the evil side. There is also a Messiah, son of Joseph, of the side of holiness, and that is Benjamin Netanyahu. I've been going on too long. We got to get into what Rabbi Kessin says. You can find this video on YouTube, and there's the URL for it.
So as I said, there are two fundamental operations that the tikkun process requires. One, and I will explain them, and how what they do in many ways influences or determines the fate of the nations, of the world itself.
So, Tikkun Olam is rectification of the world. It's the Jewish mission. And he says that there are two parts to this Jewish mission. One is to take the sparks of holiness from the Gentiles who were given them by Satan when Jewish people sin. The other is to hyper-animate the sparks of holiness that descend from Shekinah. So we have Jacob in his tents, Judah in their tents, worshiping God to give the divine flow greater power so that they can create a new reality in his words and change the present world into the world to come. The other aspect of that mission is the Joseph side that enters among the Gentile peoples and sucks away everything that makes them live from within. And then when they wither and die off, they then move on to the next Gentile nation.
In any case, so the first operation is called Hispashtus Kedusha. Okay, Hispashtus means the proliferation or the expansion of holiness. And the second idea is called Kfiyah Sorah, the subjugation or subduing of evil underneath Kedusha, underneath holiness. And that's really what it is. Those two ideas. They determine these are the objectives of what Jews have to do, since we, the Jews, are involved in accomplishing the tikkun. That's really what it's all about.
So he is clarifying the idea that there is this two-part process, and that this is what they do, and this is what they have always done.
We want them to change the reality of Olam Hazeh, this world, into what's called Olam Haba, the future world.
Olam Hazeh is the present world that we exist in, the world that includes the other side. In the world to come, the other side will be destroyed. Gentiles will no longer exist. And that's the theme of my book, Beware of the World to Come. And I explain the nullification process in much more detail in my book, Rise Above the Gods Who Hate Us, and my book series, Satanic Secrets of Jesus Christ, again, which you can find on my website, CJBBooks.com, if you want to learn more about all this in great detail. And I give all the passages from the Torah, Talmud, Kabbalah, Tanakh, and Midrash, which prove all this in their own words.
But there's a second operation, and that's called Kfiyah Sorah, the subjugation of evil.
So it's important to note that not only are there two operations, there are two completely distinct universes in Kabbalah. The Gentiles are the Sitra Achra, the evil other side, the Sitra de Smola, the left-hand side. The rabbi's people are the Sitra Yemina, the right-hand side, the Sitra de Kedusha, the side of holiness. And these two sides are in perpetual combat. And Satan is supposedly always trying to take the sparks of his people when they sin and transfer them to the greatest nation of the Sitra Achra, the other side, so that it becomes beautiful and mighty. And then when that nation becomes beautiful and mighty, it is the mission of Tikkun Olam, rectification of the world, for his people to move into that nation and deliberately cause it to deteriorate by performing the mitzvot and by refusing to assimilate. And then those sparks of holiness and the wealth of those great nations leaves those great nations and goes to his people. This process often takes about 400 to 430 years. His people, as he points out, have been in America about 400 years. So it is now time for America, which represents Rome, to deteriorate and disappear. And the only way, supposedly, we can save ourselves is to elect their slave, Donald Trump, and become their servants. Otherwise, we will lose not only our beauty and might, but our civility and cease to exist, be nullified.
Obviously, it's combat. This is called a war because we're both vying for victory. It's almost like an eternal battle for the main object, you see. And that object is what? Really is Kedusha. It's amazing that even Satan vies for the Kedusha of the spheres, you know. And it's interesting that there are movies that
So the spheros he's talking about are the 10 sephirot of the Tree of Life. The emanations from the Ein Sof come down and enter the crown of the Tree of Life, and then they fill these spheres, these sephirah, and the light descends down like a bolt of lightning down through to the earth, which is the kingdom Malkut. And he says that Gentiles and Satan, Gentiles are the children of Satan of the other side, and his people, who is the side of holiness, are both vying for these holy sparks of light, which give them all existence. And that if the other side is deprived of these sparks of light, it will cease to exist.
actually played up this concept of you can have a force where both sides vie for the same force. It can be used for good or can be used for evil. Same force. It's very interesting that in a certain sense, I know there are Hollywood productions that have made use of this very important concept and so on, you know. Before the end of time, God will introduce many Kabbalistic ideas. This is a Kabbalistic concept, obviously, you know, in order that the world should be used to these ideas before the Mashiach comes, and they won't be shocked. So he actually has, which is very interesting, Hollywood, which can promote so many ideas to the world, actually use some of these Kabbalistic concepts, you see, and it's one of the many ways that God uses mankind to spread the true ideas.
So obviously it's not God spreading these ideas. We all know who runs Hollywood, who boasts about running Hollywood. So they are using predictive programming. They are engaging in psychological warfare, just as they did with Christianity and Islam, to condition the American people and the world to accept the idea that Messiah, son of David, is going to arrive, and that this is supposedly a good thing for humanity and a blessing for humanity, and that the terrible suffering of the rabbi's people enables them to take away all the sparks of holiness from the Goyim, from the Gentiles, from the nations, and empower their Messiah, son of David, who will then bring down the divine presence of the Shekinah, the female aspect of God, which will enable them to change reality and turn the present world, Malkut, into the world to come, Malkut, when the divine presence of Tiferet and through the phallus of Yesod will then create the world to come, Olam Haba, and the present world, Olam Hazeh, will cease to exist, and together with it, the evil side, all the Gentiles, will likewise disappear.
If you sin, then the Satan can take your private holiness and he becomes strong, which has, in many ways, terrible repercussions for the Jewish people, you see? And he will be powerful and give that power to the nations of the world. That's how they get their power. They get it from the Satan's ability to take from the holiness of the Jew.
So we have this terrible view of non-Jews as if they have no inherent goodness of their own, that they have no right to exist, that they have no holiness, that they are this evil other side of Satan's universe, whereas his people are the side of God, of Shekinah, and of the holiness. And therefore, everything that is good, that is beautiful and mighty, that is generated by Gentiles, is instead caused by Satan, who has taken that goodness, beauty, and holiness from the Jewish people, and therefore Gentiles have no right to their own goodness, beauty, and holiness, have no right to exist, because again, their existence is contingent upon getting this divine flow of sparks from God. And so it is the mission of his people to enter into those nations and ensure that they not survive and instead deteriorate and lose all their holy sparks, lose all their wealth, and lose all their beauty and might.
The success and the power and the might of nations depends on how much Kedusha, holiness, that the Satan has been able to steal from the Jews by getting them to sin. It's through combat. And this is what we witness all the time throughout history. You now have to take that Kedusha, take it out of the hands of the Satan, and restore it to what's called the side of holiness. And from there you could take it down. You see? So it comes out a two-part job. That's the Kfiyah Surah, to subdue evil by removing, you see, and starving the Satan from that Kedusha, and putting it in what's called Sitra de Kedusha, the side of holiness, by taking it away from Sitra Achra, the other side, which is the side of the Satan.
Again, in Kabbalah, as I've been explaining for years and years, they believe that there is the holy universe and then a counter universe to that, that they are the masters of that holy universe, and therefore all of the sparks that animate life belong to them, and it is incumbent upon them to harvest them out of the great nations and to bring them to themselves, and that we are part of the Sitra Achra, the other side, the Sitra de Smola, the left-hand side, that is to be destroyed. And they call this sifting out the sparks of holiness from the Sitra Achra, so that all that's left of the Sitra Achra is the Kelipat, the shards, the shells, the husks that conceal those divine sparks. And the process of Tikkun Olam is the process of separating those sparks, stealing them from the Gentile world, absorbing them into his people's world, the Sitra de Kedusha, the side of holiness, the Sitra Yemina, the right-hand side, and that this is how this war is fought. They work their way into the other nations, and they keep secret what they're doing, And they perform these 613 mitzvot, which include exterminating Gentiles, practicing usury, and refusing to assimilate. And then these sparks of holiness, which supposedly Satan has given to this Gentile nation through the Jews' sins that caused them to lose those sparks, Satan to take those sparks and then give them to these great nations of Egypt, Babylon, Persia, and Rome, which is now America and Christianity and the European peoples.
See that? So therefore, there are two basic operations that the Jews are involved with. You see, Adam was only involved in one. But after the sin, there now has a new operation called Kfir Surah, to subdue evil by removing the Kedusha that he took as a result of the sins of the Jew. And this is a very, very important concept. When a person has the Kedusha, then he immediately receives a consequence. What is the consequence? That he has what's called Oiz and Tiferes, might and beauty. That's what he has. What is Oiz? Oiz is might, success. Doesn't only mean physical might, but it means that everything goes your way, you see? So Oiz means literally might, but it means the successful involvement in the struggle to exist. Oiz.
So the Jewish mission is to take away the oiz of the great nations of the Gentiles, so that they no longer have the power, the might, the success to continue to exist. And not only to take it away, but by taking away their wealth and their international influence and then passing along to the next nation, they give that power to themselves. So it's a relationship of a host and you know what.
Power, and so on. That's Oiz. And it means success. Tiferes is beauty. Beauty is what? Is the quality of civilization. The beauty, the chokhmah, the wisdom. You see, whatever it be, the scientific, the technological, just the quality of life is beautiful.
So that's what I was explaining, like the beauty of Egypt, the Tiferes, it's also called Japheth, Yefes, is what the Gentiles themselves create from their own innate nature, but he's claiming it's given to them and stolen from the Jewish people, which is absurd, obviously. But it is what makes a civilization great, the heritage, the culture, the beliefs, the traditions, the family structure, everything that made America great, the Constitution, our founding fathers, the Anglo-Saxon stock that created the nation, the Germanic stock that populated the nation. All of those things are the Tiferes, the beauty that enabled that civilization to become such a high civilization and such a ruling civilization over the whole earth, and to set the example for the whole earth of what is beautiful, what is a superlative civilization. The Romans did that, the Babylonians did that, the Persians did that. For a while, the Spanish did that, the British did that, the Germans did that. And in all of these nations, his people moved in to steal that and destroy it and deteriorate it, as he will explain himself.
Because it's superlative. So that's Tiferes. When you have the divine force in your pocket, so to speak, then you get Tiferes and Oiz. Those are the two gifts that you get because you have the divine flow. If the Satan has it, then he gets the Tiferes and Oiz, right? But he doesn't get Tiferes and Oiz, but he's able to give that Tiferes and Oiz to the nations of the world. Therefore, there are two jobs. The first job is to bring down the Kedusha, the sparks. But the real job...
Again, that was initially Adam's job before Adam's sin, was to complete and perfect the rectification of the world, the tikkun olam. That was his only job, was to obey the mitzvot that God had commanded, to not eat of the tree of knowledge. But again, Satan deceived him, defamed God, and that started to wither that flow, that divine flow. Adam had the opportunity to intensify that flow, which then became the Jews' role through Judah to intensify the flow in the 10 Sephirot, so that they could then change reality and create the world to come.
Now, depending on how much mankind or the Jewish people sin, the real first job is to get back all the Kedusha that he took. Then you take that and you put it back into the side of holiness, and then as a result of that, we can then bring down the rest to transform reality. That's the formula. That's how it works.
So the formula is, for a certain segment of the Jewish population, I believe the Sephardic Jews, to produce a Messiah, son of David, who will bring down the divine presence of Shekinah, and who obeys the mitzvot and lives in the tents and lives away from the Gentiles, often among the Muslims, the Noachide slaves, the Muslims, and is not involved with the tree of knowledge and sinning. And then you have the other side that goes into Edom. You have the Ashkenazi Jews. And the Ashkenazi Jews represent the force of Joseph as opposed to the force of Judah. And they perform the other mission of Kafias Hara, subduing evil. And what their job is to undermine everything in the nation that they move into, to steal all its wealth and to steal all of its holy sparks and bring them to the rabbis' people, who then become super illuminated with all of this holiness. And meanwhile, in this 400-year often process, the nation that they have moved into and infiltrated deteriorates, withers, and disappears and is nullified.
That's the beginning of the understanding of why there are two Mashiachs. Mashiach ben Yosef, his job is to contend with the Satan, to fight the Satan, you see. And as a result of that, right, to take back all the Kedusha that he took and bring it back to our side. And the Mashiach ben David, his job is to bring down all the sparks and change reality. And he said to Avraham Avinu, mankind is sinning, and I'm going to take away the power of tikkun from mankind. They will no longer be called Yisrael. They will just be called nation of the world. They'll be called.
So what he's talking about is, as he and I described earlier, that Egypt for 2,000 years absorbed all of the holiness that disappeared from all of mankind. Because after Adam sinned, it then became a process whereby Satan would absorb the holy sparks from humanity and create his own super powerful nation. And that was Egypt. And then Abraham came along, and Joseph despoiled Egypt, caused Egypt to starve. All the Egyptians gave their wealth to the rabbis' people when they engaged in the Exodus, and Joseph got the Egyptians to surrender themselves as the slaves of Joseph by first starving them in the same way that Jacob was able to starve Esau and trick him into surrendering his birthright and blessings for food. This has been an ongoing strategy and tactic that they have used over and over and over again. They not only did it to the Egyptians, they did it to all the people in the Soviet Union. They did it to the Ukrainians in the Holodomor. They did it to the Indians through the British. They did it to the Irish through the British. They did it to Germany in World War I. They did it to the Armenians in the Armenian genocide. They starved them, and today they are starving the Palestinians to death in a massive genocide so that the Palestinians are nullified and cease to exist. This is part of their commandment to kill off the 7 nations, kill off Amalek, which ultimately means kill off the entire other side, all of us.
Oh, Goy. They will no longer be called Israel. They will just be called nation of the world. They'll be called Goy. So since Yosef now had the job of Kfir Sarah, to take back the Kedusha from the Sultan that the Sultan took, he now had that power. So he had to go into the den of sinning, which is Egypt. He took back an enormous amount of energy, divine energy, that was in the hands of the Sultan, you see. So when the Sultan loses all that energy because of the incredible struggle that Yosef had, then he starves. Well, guess what? If the Sultan starves, then his major agent also starves, because that agent, which happened to be Egypt, gets its power from all the Kedusha that the Sultan took. Because when the Rebbe Hashem told Avram Avinu that you will take over the job, what he told him, it's not enough to bring down the light of the spheres. You need to take back all the energy that the nations of the world, because they had the power to give, has given that nation, which we were the major agent of the Sultan. They got to take that back. And now you know why the Jews went to Egypt. Because part of their job was Kfir Sarah. That's really why they went to Egypt. They had to take back all that energy that they gave, right, to the Sultan, who then empowered Tiferes Hanois.
So all of the exiles and the diaspora were not engineered by Gentiles. They were instead engineered by his people, because they wanted to force the whole tribe to disperse throughout the world so that they could enter into every nation on earth and steal its sparks of holiness, its essence of divinity, which enables it to survive. In other words, to exterminate all of the nations on earth. And through this process of penetrating into every nation, and most importantly, the greatest nations on earth, and turning them to their purpose through the self-destruction and the external destruction of each and every one of those nations. They then believe they gain the power to create a new reality, and the new reality is the reality in which Satan and his people, the non-Jewish peoples of the world, the Goy, the Goyim, the nations, cease to exist. And the present world, which includes all the non-Jewish people, cease to exist. And then that world is then rectified. The Kelipat are destroyed. The sparks are released. And then Messiah, son of David, ushers in the world to come. Olam Haba, the present world, which contains Gentiles, is destroyed through this process of stealing the power, might, and holiness of the Gentile peoples and taking it for his people. And then they have the power through all this embellished and expanded holiness to create the world to come. Olam Haba, in which we will not exist. And that's what's taking place today.
He gave beauty and might to Egypt, most powerful nation on earth. You see? So Yosef was the beginning of that. When he succeeded in denying the temptation, he bankrupted the Sultan, which automatically bankrupted Egypt. And now you know why Egypt starved for 7 years. That starvation is an indication that the Tiferes and Ois, the beauty and the might that they had, is now bankrupt, you see? And therefore, Yosef got himself out of prison, right, by bankrupting Egypt and by first bankrupting the Sultan. Not totally, but enough where he would become Grand Vizier, which is second to Paroi, not as powerful as Paroi. You see, so this relationship explains why there was a famine in Egypt, and what does Yosef have to do with the famine, besides revealing it to Paroi? Because in many ways, Yosef created the famine by withstanding the evil of the Sultan, you see, in Egypt, and therefore the Sultan would starve, and therefore Egypt would starve.
So that's what's happening to America today. We are being forced into starvation through the destruction of our food supply and through increasing debts. It is these same people who are engineering all of this, and they are doing it to destroy us so that we become their slaves, to bring in their Messiah, son of David, at which point we will be completely annihilated. So please take this seriously. As ridiculous as all this sounds, they succeeded in destroying Egypt. They succeeded in destroying Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. They believe America is an extension of Rome, and they will complete the destruction of Rome by completing our destruction. And he proposes that we can get out of that by electing Donald Trump, who he admits Donald Trump undermined the best interests of Americans in favor of the best interests of the rabbis' people. So the end result will, of course, be the same. If Donald Trump is elected, he will accelerate the process of the destruction of America. We have to get people in power who are not agents of these people, rather than empowering their most dedicated agent.
So we know what that means. They went out with the wealth of Egypt. Kabbalistically or mystically, that's...
I don't know how many of you know this, but in the Bible, in the story of Exodus, it said that God made the Egyptian people love his people and loan them all their jewelry, gems, gold, and silver, which his people then took out with them when they left Egypt. So they completely ripped off the Egyptians. That's going to happen to America. We're going to lose all the gold in Fort Knox. We're deeply in debt. They're going to pay off the national debt by handing over all of our national forests, all of our resources, all of our gold and silver, which they believe belong to them. They believe that since the Torah was offered to all of the nations which rejected it, only they accepted it. Therefore, they have a right to all the wealth in the world. We see the WEF talking about you will own nothing and be happy. That's because Messiah, son of David, will own everything on earth as being the instrument of the divine presence, and all the gold and silver and jewels will be in Jerusalem, and specifically in their third temple, which they're setting about to construct.
Really what they were there for. Not just to remove the spoils of Egypt, but to remove the sparks of holiness that the Egyptians had as a result of the sins that mankind did for 2,000 years. And all the hosts, right, cultists and all the hosts of God went out from Egypt. You now understand.
So what happens was they stole everything from Egypt. They stole its holiness. They stole its Tiferes and Ois. They stole its beauty and might, and they ruined Egypt. And then they would move on to other nations. They got their own for a little while, but then they sinned horribly, and Satan supposedly stole that Tiferes and Ois and Kedusha from them and created the next great empire that they had to move in as Joseph and perform the Kafias Hara, perform subduing evil, and once again destroy another nation by moving into it and ruining it, as happens to a host when this type of thing moves in to suck away all its life force.
The real story of Egypt is a spiritual task to remove the sparks of holiness and to bankrupt the something. But what happened to Egypt? You never really hear from it again. I mean, they became a small-time local, but they never achieved the greatness of the Tiferes and Ois, the beauty and might that they achieved before, you see. And by the way, what's important is that's our gifts. And you will see that we've given those gifts to the nations of the world. The Jews, their job.
That's really a horrible view of the rest of humanity. They refuse to live in peaceful coexistence with anyone else because they believe that no one else has the right to exist, that the sparks of holiness which animate them and give them the life force are actually the gifts only to his people, and therefore they have to be taken away from everyone else. So what they do is they move into every other nation and cause it to deteriorate and cease to exist and become a local.
Job is to take back all the sparks from the Sultan back into the holiness of the spheres and then bring it down to change Olam Hazeh into Olam Haba. And that's why you find that whenever the Jews go into a place and they leave, then that place basically collapses. But notice the pattern here. Jews go in, stay, and try to avoid becoming assimilated and so on. And obviously they succeed to a certain extent, and that nation loses its Tiferes and Ois. But when the Jews finally do go in, and they do their job, whatever their job is in the Avodah, in the service of God, and then it collapses. It loses its Tiferes and Ois.
So we can see by the machinations of these people in the United States of opening our borders, of destroying our culture, especially with Hollywood, of introducing all kinds of degeneracy and perversions as they do in every nation that they enter in the name of liberty, fraternity, and equality. They have deliberately caused us to lose our beauty and might, to lose our culture, to lose our heritage, to lose our civility, to lose everything that makes us a great civilization. And that's the formula.
You see? But as the Jews go into Edom, which is Western civilization, the power of individuals also collapses. Again, because it all depends how much Kedusha they take back. There's a slow deterioration where the Jews go into. I mean, look, what's the classic? Christian Spain, right? So this is what happens with Jews, the Sultan, and the nations of the world. And because what happens is the Jews enter, like I said, you know the formula. They enter, they do whatever they have to do, and God knows exactly how much they've done. They leave with all the Kedusha, all the sparks of holiness, they leave, and the Tiferes and Ois of that nation collapses.
So this is what every nation that they have ever entered into has accused them of doing. And this is why they have been expelled. But as he said, when they get expelled, often that expulsion is engineered by they themselves, because they have sucked all the life force out of the host. They have sucked all the wealth out of the host, the culture, the high culture, the civilization, the music, the art has all become degenerate and corrupted. All of the civil processes of government have been destroyed, and life becomes miserable within those countries. So they whip up anti-Semitism and they get expelled. And then they move to the next nation because they have sinned themselves so much in this now wicked nation that they themselves have made wicked, that Kedusha, that holiness, leaves them, some of it, and enters a new nation, which then becomes great with its Tiferes and Ois. And he says that that present process has happened to America, and the next nation is China. But he wants to save us and be good to us and prevent that from happening by encouraging us to vote for the Mashiach's agent, Donald Trump, who is their servant, is their slave, betrays the best interests of America for them, and then we'll get to live a little bit longer.
So we constantly see this diminishment or reduction in the beauty and the might of a civilization that the Jews have gone through. Well, what about now in America? Based on this formula, we would say something interesting is happening. America is really dying. The Jews have been in America for a long time, and they've done whatever their job was to do, right? But we know the underlying pattern.
So their job was to cause us to deteriorate, to take away our Tiferes and Ois, our beauty and might, and to take away our Kedusha, our sparks of holiness, so that we have no divine force, no divine flow to keep us alive. They have sucked away the life force of the host, and that's the stage that we are at now, just as they did to Egypt and all those other nations that have been cited.
Is that they will do their job to whatever extent God requires, or reduction in the beauty and the might of a civilization that the Jews have gone through. Well, what about now in America? Based on this formula, we would say something interesting is happening. America is really dying. The Jews have been in America for a long time, and they've done whatever their job was to do, right? But we know the underlying pattern is that they will do their job to whatever extent God requires, whatever, and therefore they will remove the Tiferes and Ois. Guess what? The Tiferes and Ois of America is gone. So what we're watching in America is worse than what we've seen in other civilizations. Trump.
He's cited as an example of that Trump was abused in the justice system and that civil society has broken down in America, which he says not only with the cumulative theft of our sparks of holiness and our Tiferes and Ois, it's even worse than what happened to the Egyptians, because now even the fundamental structure of civil society has been destroyed, and he blames the woke lefties. But we know who are behind the woke lefties. We know who created Marxism and who runs Hollywood and who has been pushing all of these agendas of societal degeneration. As he said, they have done their job on America, but we can still save ourselves. All we have to do is get the people in power who are deliberately doing this to us out of power, and that's not going to happen by electing Donald Trump, for sure not.
Trump, like I said, is a messianic figure. Of course, he's not Mashiach. He's not Jewish even. But Edom, Esau, has a Mashiach.
So as I've been explaining, there are those two messiahs that have their roles. Messiah, son of Joseph, who performs the Kafias Hara, subduing evil, destroying the Gentiles by entering into their society and becoming their ruler and undermining them and getting them to serve the agenda of his people instead of their own agenda, so that they deteriorate, lose all their culture, and wither and die. But there are also two aspects of that. There is the Messiah, son of Joseph, of the Gentile world, who they're trying to make Trump into. And then that can be further divided, that soul of the Messiah, son of Joseph, of the Sitra Achra, the evil other side, the Sitra de Smola, the left-hand side of the Gentiles, also can be subdivided. It can be divided into, for example, Trump and into, let's say, Vladimir Putin. But then there is also the Messiah, son of Joseph, of the holy side, the Sitra de Smola, Sitra de Kedusha, and of the right-hand side, the Sitra Yemina, which is the side of his people, Sitra de Kedosha, Sitra Yemina, side of holiness, the right-hand side. They have their own Messiah, son of Joseph, which right now is Benjamin Netanyahu, who is a descendant of another one of the Messiah, son of Joseph's, of the holy side, the Gaon of Vilna. And in the Kol HaTor, it opens by stating that the Gaon of Vilna is the Messiah, son of Joseph. And Benjamin Netanyahu has revealed that he is a direct descendant of the Gaon of Vilna, and he is acting as the Messiah, son of Joseph, who is trying to lure America into destroying itself by fighting wars for him and fighting wars for Israel, self-consuming wars. The Messiah, son of David, of the Gentile world, the Gaon of Vilna explained this, is the leader of Islam, and that became also the leader of communism. So we have like Xi Jinping and the leaders of Islam being the Messiah, son of David, of the Gentile side. And then we have the Sephardic king who is hidden in the holy side, the side of holiness, representing the Messiah, son of David, of the side of holiness. So there are all these subdivisions, and it gets extremely complicated.
That means that America will now assist the Jews in bringing the Mashiach. And that's
so Trump would assist Netanyahu and Putin in bringing about the destruction of the West, undermining NATO, destroying all European peoples, destroying Edom, destroying Rome once and for all. And then when the Messiah, son of Joseph, both on the side of his people and on the Gentile side, have accomplished that work, and when Edom is finally destroyed, they will take all of our sparks of holiness, all of our wealth. They will build their third temple. We, Amalek, will have been exterminated, and then they can crown their true king, David HaMelech, Messiah, King Messiah, Messiah, son of David, will then be king. And that two-part mission will have ended. And then also they will not have only have stolen all the wealth and holy sparks and beauty and might of the Gentiles and taken it for themselves. They will also have brought down all of this divine holiness, these sparks of holiness, and they will create the world to come. They will have their temple, and they will be the only people to exist in the world to come.
What it means, Rav Yavitzoya, right? The older will assist the younger to do what? To do the tikkun.
So he's saying that the older Esau will serve the younger Jacob, that Trump will serve Jacob, serve his people, and that will bring about the rectification of the present world and the arrival of the world to come, in which we will no longer exist.
And we see that he's assisting Israel. He's the greatest president that has benefited Israel in the entire American history. There's no question about that. Whoever heard of things like that? Even though many of the acts that he did were contrary to what was in the self-interest of the United States itself. Because he's now here to help the Jews bring the Mashiach, bring the Geula. Because Trump is going to take back the Kedusha. Because he now has become an ally and a servant of Yaakov.
So Rabbi Kessin is stating that he wants to be good to us and let us have back some of that Kedusha, which we supposedly stole from his people when his people sinned. The Satan supposedly took that nourishment and then gave it to America and made America great. Had nothing to do with the great Americans that made America great. No, that was all stolen from his people via Satan as the conduit, who then gave us our beauty and might. So his people had to move in and take it all from us because it's their gift, not ours. And Trump's going to help them do that.
At the same time that America is collapsing and deteriorating, not only as beauty and might disappears, right? With all the terrible things happening in America, right? But at the same time that they are dying as a civil society, who is building up? Because there's always somebody that builds up that the Sultan has to give somebody else the Tferes Anois. And the answer is China.
So there you have it. This is what I've been saying for 25 years. This is what many people have said all throughout history, that the rabbis, people, utilize our nations as hosts. They suck out all the wealth. They destroy all the culture, all the indigenous religions, which takes away our holiness. We have no divine protection, so we become vulnerable to be abused and victimized by this people, who then use us up, often in a 400-year cycle, and then move on to the next host. We can see that this people, through Kissinger, through Mao Zedong, through Al Gore and Bill Clinton, and through Obama and through Trump, managed to, and through Walmart and Apple and Elon Musk, have managed to transfer the wealth, the Tiferes and Ois, the beauty and might, and the Kedusha, the sparks of holiness, from America to China. So now that our life force has been sucked out, they're going to do the Exodus process, just like they did to Egypt, supposedly. As the Hyksos, they took over the religion of Egypt. They sucked out all the sparks of holiness. They sucked out all the wealth. And they moved on to the land of the Canaanites, and then they destroyed the Canaanites. So what the pattern is, what the formula is, supposedly, if we don't submit to Trump selling us out to these people, everything will move over to China, and we will suffer a worse fate than Egypt, than Babylon, than Persia, as the ultimate fate of Rome, to be nullified and to cease to exist. Again, I want to thank the gentleman who forwarded me this video, and I want to thank all my contributors. If you'd like to contribute, you can do so at my website, cjbbooks.com. Beneath each one of my book titles, which you will find there, you'll find contribution links. You can find my book, Beware the World to Come, where I explained this whole process, as I've been explaining since my book, The Manufacture and Sale of St. Einstein, from about 20 years ago, where I really went into detail of breaking down how they steal all and destroy all the truth, beauty, and everything glorious, the Tiferes Anois of all of our societies, in order to nullify us into chaos, where I really deeply explain that is in my book, Rise Above the Gods Who Hate Us, and in my book series, Satanic Secrets of Jesus Christ. I thank you for your patience as I'm finishing up volumes 3 and 4 of that series. It's coming. I have an additional book on top of that coming. I have to keep making these videos as I go. So it's a long process, but believe me, it's worth it. And I want to thank my contributors. Once again, you have saved my ass temporarily in these very trying times that I go through, and I'm deeply grateful. Thank you, Carolus, Norbert, Umberto, Gregory, Bob, Lance, Bosma, Angelina, Jerry, Jeannie, Barry, Ali, Ryan, Carolina, Anisha, Kelly, Mark, Robert, Kevin, Gary, Elton, John Garaitis, Paul, Oliver, Wilson, George, and at Alan Greenspun. Thank you so very much. Please continue to contribute. I definitely need it. And again, you can find my books on these and many other subjects at cjbbooks.com. I want to thank you all for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please learn about this stuff because our lives depend upon us. If this exodus happens, it will be the final exodus and all of humanity will be destroyed. And Donald Trump wants to help them bring that about. I will see all of you good people next time. Thank you again for watching. Thank you again very much for contributing. You saved me. Goodbye for now.